Okay, we're right on the hour, so I'm going to get started. Hello, my name is Andrew. I'm one of the educators here at Bywater, and I've got Kelly here with me, another educator here.
Hi. I don't know if I'm muted. Oh, I'm not muted. Okay,
No,
good.
I'm gonna mute you now, though.
Okay, thanks.
So today we're talking about the upgrades in technical services for Koha 1711. So just a bit of a informational dump to start, which you've probably all heard before. But these upgrades are going to start in early June and continue throughout the month. We're going to do all of those upgrades after 8 p.m. your local time, so hopefully not while you're open. And we will always give you a note in the news in your staff client a week before the upgrade happens, so we shouldn't be surprising anybody with this. If you've got any reason why you need to adjust those times, if there are specific dates that don't work for you for that upgrade, please do let us know. We can be flexible as you need us to be. Once that upgrade happens, really all you need to do on your end is to make sure that you clear your browser cache after the upgrade. If you do not clear that out, some of the features may not work properly, so just make sure you take care of that. I'm going to put into chat a link to the upgrade notes. This page contains, and I'll open it up in my browser here so you can see it as well. This page contains a schedule of our remaining webinars, which I think is actually just one, our remaining webinar, and also links to all of our previous recorded webinars, and also questions and answers that have come up in the course of these webinars, just things that people asked that we wanted to loop back around to on the blog. So if you've missed any of the previous webinars, please do have a look at this page. It'll point you to whatever it is that you missed. So as we get started here, please do let me know if you have questions. So you're all muted, but you can put your questions either into the chat or into the Q&A box. I'll try to field those as I go along. Kelly will wave at me if I miss anything. If you do put questions into the chat, make sure that in the chat you've selected all panelists and attendees to make sure that your message is going to everybody. It's easy if you overlook that to send something just to me, and then everybody else doesn't know what we're talking about. Okay. So with that, I'm going to dive into some cataloging changes before moving on to other acquisitions and tools and whatnot. So the first thing I want to point out is that in 1711, we now have the option to set MARC org codes at a branch level. So previously we had a system preference that set MARC organizational code for all libraries in your Koha system, which is fine for single locations, but gets less good for consortiums or any group of libraries where somebody has a different MARC org code. So now if we go in Koha administration, and to libraries and groups, for each library in this list, in the edit screen, we have the option to set a branch-specific MARC organization code. If we put something here, any records we make while cataloging for this branch are going to populate with that specific MARC org code. If we leave this field blank for any or all of our branches, it's instead going to default back to that existing system preference. So if you've got just one location that has its own code, you put it in for them. You don't put it in for anybody else. Everybody else just uses that default. Another new cataloging feature is over in System Preferences, we now have the option to define a default place of publication, so a default country code for the 008 field other than the United States. So previously, Koha just kind of figured everybody was cataloging in the US, which was not great for folks who are not in the US. But now, let me pull this system preference up, see if I can talk and type at the same time. That'll do.
Andrew, you spelled default wrong. So obviously,
Whoa, well, that's
you
picky.
can talk at this.
You have to spell right. Oh. So now if you are not in the US, or for whatever reason you want to catalog as if you are not in the US, you can come to this system preference and put in your correct country code. And there's a link right here off to the page where Mark defines those country codes that you'll want to use. Moving along into the cataloging module properly, a couple nice new features here. The first one is small but helpful. Whenever you are making a new record, you now have, waiting for it, a handy dandy cancel button. Previously, if you had started a record and you wanted to cancel it or move out of it, you had to just go to a new page or back up. Now you can just cancel it and leave it and come back to it later. I love when people get excited about something like a cancel button. It's very small, but it is very helpful. And then for the next cataloging feature, I'm going to bounce over to the advanced editor. Okay. So in the advanced editor, we've added a little bit of support for a couple of those 00 fields that are not so fun to do by hand, specifically the 006 and the 007. So if I add an 006 here, I immediately get this little helper that prompts me to fill this field out properly. I can select my item type, well not, yeah, my material type, and then any of these null fields, if I click on them, they populate with a drop down of appropriate values. And then I do an 007, I get the same thing. So just a little help there, filling out some of those less human readable mark fields. And then, probably should have done this in a slightly different order because I'm going to bounce back over to the basic editor for my next cataloging feature. And this is in the, similarly the 008 field. Over in the basic editor, it does have a little helper like that. If I click on the button here, the tag editor. So previously, OK and cancel for this helper, for this tag editor, were down at the bottom, which was not so great because really most people, they set the material, maybe a couple of other things at the top here. So we've moved that button to be just a little handier. Save you some scrolling as you're going through your 008s. So that's it for the actual cataloging editor stuff. I'm going to pull up an item here for my next feature. Ooh, Star Wars spaceships. So we've added in the add and edit item screen an easier way to print a label. So I'm going to say new item. So now this action button in the holdings table from the add and edit item screen includes a print label link, which is nice if you need to change something here, but it's even nicer if you are adding a new item. So let me click a couple things here to add a new item. We'll give it a barcode, and that ought to do. So now we've got our new item that needs itself a label. I say print label. It bumps me over into the label creator and actually makes a batch out of that item I picked. So it's more than just giving us that quick spine label. It's pushing us over entirely into the label printing interface. So any label we want to print, we can do from here. So it's exactly the same as if we had gone to the label editor and made a new batch out of this one item. It's just saving us several clicks in the process. And then my last cataloging upgrade is one I really like for linking multiple formats of the same title together. This is allowing us to add and display mark field 776 in the OPAC and the staff client. So to show you this, I'm going to find a couple of bibs that I know we have the book and the audiobook of this item. I had to add a new one because Kelly got overexcited and deleted one of our previous exams.
You know, I knew you were going to bring that up.
Okay, so for Star Wars from a certain point of view, I've got both the book and the audiobook. So let me grab, I'm just going to open these both up in separate tabs. So if I go into the book and into the record, I'm looking for the 776. Additional physical form entry. So when you go live on 1711, you'll want to enable this field in whichever framework you're cataloging in, whether that's just your default framework or separate frameworks between them, between different formats. So I've got two fields in here, the T and the W. The T, it's labeled as title, but this is actually what's going to display in my catalog. So I'm going to say audiobook. And then for the W, it wants the record control number, which is actually, rather than doing like the bib number, this is going to be out of the mark record of the item we want to point to. That's the 001 field. So let's load this up, and there we go. Carol, the print label link off of that add and edit item screen is going to make a new batch each time. You're welcome. Okay, so I've got my record control number for the audiobook, and jump back over to the print book and paste that in there and save. So now in my record, I've got additional physical formats with a link labeled audiobook. And that the link text here is free text. You can put in whatever you want it to be. So however you want to label those, it's up to you. Can you do multiple labels?
Can you do multiple?
Oh, different call numbers. You're only going to have one item record in the batch, starting from that print labels button. You could print different labels if you need to do like a barcode and also a biblio label to go in the front cover. And if you're just trying to think out your question here.
For Georgette, Andrew?
Yeah. We do fiction, nonfiction at the same time. That particular link is always going to take you to a batch of just one item. So that wouldn't really help, wouldn't really make a difference if you're doing fiction and nonfiction sort of cataloging them all in a go. Each time you click that print label button, it's going to push over into its own batch. So there'd be no issue switching between the two, but it's not going to do them together. Sorry, I'm just rambling at this point. Okay, and Heather says, if we use the 776i relationship information for a display text, will that display in addition to the T and W? I don't know.
Don't know either, so we should give it a shot.
Yeah, let's have a look at the framework and see what happens if we make the I visible. I don't know why it wouldn't, but, well, Ed says it will depend on the XSLT's style sheet, which is true. Let's see if we get lucky. Let's look at our subfields here. We've got I in there. Oh, yeah, Ed's right. If I go here and make this visible, that only controls whether you see it in the mark, but let's put a value in and see if it shows up in the XSLT.
Yeah, because the bug wasn't specific to which field, so...
Yeah, so we might be in luck.
Yeah.
$776, there we go. Nope, doesn't look like it's showing up. Just pop over to the OPAC just in case it shows there. Be surprised if they don't match, but no, it looks like it's not showing up. So that would be something we could enter a bug for to get that field to display. But that would take, a change to the XSLT sheet. Okay, so the I aside, we've got a link from our print book to our audiobook. Now, these links don't automatically reverse themselves. So if we want the audiobook then to link back to the print book, we need to pop over to the audiobook and just enter that link going back the other way. This is a repeatable field, so if you have audio in print and large print, you can put multiple links within each one. They just show up in a list there. Oh, good. Kelly's putting in a bug for Heather. And we did, to give Kelly credit, she deleted the previous example just to test what would happen. It does not automatically remove that link if the item it's linking to is deleted. So you do want to, if you enter some of these, you're going to want to be careful if you later remove those bib records.
Yeah. And Ed is correct. You can purchase custom XSLT, which could display those. But
yeah, that's true. Okay. So now I'm going to move away from cataloging into some acquisitions upgrades. So let me close out all my tabs here. And go to acquisitions. So 1711 is giving us some more flexibility in when our items are created in the acquisitions process. Previously, oh, let me read Heather's note first. Oh, okay. Looks like Heather's working on something with Barton to try to figure that out. So previously we had one system preference that told Koha, when do you want to create items for what you're ordering? Do you want to do that when you're placing the order, when you receive the order? But you had to do that the same across all of your baskets. So now in 1711, we've been given a little more flexibility. We can define that by basket. So I'm going to just pop into a vendor here, open up a new basket, and the very last field in this basket setup is create items when. So you can see right now it's saying use default, which means look back at that global system preference. And it tells me what my system preference is set to, placing an order. But if I want to do this basket differently from what I usually do, I can say, instead, do this when I receive the order or when I catalog the record. So if you've got some vendors or just some instances in which you want your workflow to vary from the norm, you've got that flexibility now. My other acquisitions related thing is, I'll pop back here and go to suggestions. In patron purchase suggestions now, we can define a quantity. I should say patrons can define a quantity. Let me open this one up here. So if a patron has a reason why they want you to purchase multiple copies of something for a book group or a class or what have you, they can now define that in the purchase suggestion form. Actually, I'll grab the OPAC here and show it to you from that end. Already logged in, so grab my account and purchase suggestion. And let's make a new one. The quantity is going to be visible by default, but it would be real easy to squash or hide with some jQuery. I think actually we already have some jQuery for that, if I remember correctly.
I think we do, and it might be in the question and answer portion. I'll just double check.
Yep, so it gives a little quantity box here. And jumping back over into the staff side, so it shows it here in the acquisitions information. There is no reason, there's nothing in acquisitions forcing you to buy 5 copies. If you fulfill this, you can get just one. Yeah, so Victoria, it's not a system preference, but it is something that would be easy to hide. So yeah, if that is, and Victoria, you could just open a ticket for that. It'd be a real quick, just cut and paste into your intranet, or sorry, OPAC user JS system preference. Yeah, it's easy to imagine the patron who will abuse this, but it'll be helpful in some cases. And Ed asks us to put that jQuery on the wiki, which we can certainly do. All right, I'm going to take a quick swing from here over into serials. Just going to require me to spell something in French. So we've got a nice little fix here for serials subscription summaries. Previously, if you had a title with multiple subscriptions, so on this example, we've got 3 subscriptions for 3 separate branches. Oh, no, strike that. 2 for the East branch for some reason. It was not properly showing the numbering pattern for the separate subscriptions. So that's been fixed and it'll show up properly now. from there, I'm going to go over into Tools, another just nice little ease of use feature. If we're in Tools and then Plugins, the link here, you can see it is specifically Tool Plugins. For those of you who use a lot of plugins, there are different classes of plugins within Koha. This page specifically shows me just the plugins that relate to tools, but this little drop-down is new to let us move between plugin types. So if you're here and you don't see the plugin you want, you're not quite sure where it is, we can say View All and see all of the plugins we have on this site. So next I want to talk about a few things having to do with patron lists. So I'm going to go back to Tools, and I'm going to import patrons. I do believe I have a sample file here, if I can remember where I put it. Yeah. So in the Import Patrons interface, there's a new little checkbox here, Create Patron List. So this is going to, if I check it, when I import these patrons, automatically make a list out of the patrons in this import. So that'll make it really easy for me to then come back and do a bulk edit on those patrons if I realize I imported them with some incorrect feature or incorrect setting. Or if it's something like I'm importing all of my first-year students at the beginning of a term, and I want to kind of track them as a group so that next year I can go and change them all to be labeled as sophomores or whatever bulk patron change you may need to do on this group of patrons in their life through the library. It's probably our support focus that my first thought was, this will help us fix problems that we have accidentally created. All right, let's say overwrite if we've got anybody in there. All right, so that made my new patron. And if I jump over to Patron Lists, I've got a new list. It is going to give that list the name of the file you imported. And it does not give you an interface to change that as you're importing it. It gives me the date, which will help me figure out what it was. But yeah, you might want to not just import lots of lists with similar names, just to save yourself a little hassle. Because we could edit the list and change the name from here. We've also made it a little easier to view a patron list. Previously, you had to go into Actions and say Add Patrons to see the contents of that list. Now we can just click on the list name. So just a little bit more how you expect a web page to behave. So there's our list of one. And also related to patron lists, we have a new functionality in BatchPatron Modification. So in BatchPatron Modification, whether we start from a file or a list or just scanning in card numbers, we use the list to possibly check all new patrons who got cards this month. That's not quite what patron lists do. So patron lists just defines a group of patrons. You would need to use a report to get all the patrons who got cards this month. If for some reason there was a change or homeschool patrons, again, a report would find you that list, small L list, but then putting those folks into a capital L patron list would give you a little more ease of editing them, tracking them. So patron lists aren't a way to find patrons, they're a way to keep an eye on to track patrons that you've already found. Does that make sense? Oh, how did I find those patrons to import? So that was a CSV file that I had made previously, just as an example. So those would not be patrons that are already in your system. Those would be new patrons. Typically, that's something that, say, a school library or an academic library would use when they get a list of new students from their registrar. They put all those students into a CSV file that's formatted correctly for that import, and then Koha takes that and makes a whole bunch. Georgette, if that is a thing you want to use, I would suggest, just for the first time at least, opening a ticket, because the CSV file is a little fussy. It's got a lot of fields that need to be just so. Cool. And Sandra, I do not know the enhancement you're talking about. I think Kelly's going to look for it, and we'll loop back around to it. If you happen to remember a bug number or anything for it, we can certainly find it. All right, batch patron modification. I'm just going to do this on the list of patrons I just made. Thank you, Sandra. So this is a real quick one. We can now, through batch patron modification, adjust the library, which just wasn't previously available in this tool. So if you've got a chunk of patrons that need to change their default library, you can do that here now.
Okay, Andrew, you ready?
Sure.
If you go to a purchase suggestion.
In the staff side, in acquisitions?
Yeah, like yep, from the staffs.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, if you clicked on suggested by your name, Andrew, it would actually email you, like it would create.
Oh, yeah.
So now if you click on the name, it will bring the staff member to your account.
Which is kind of more what you would want that to do.
Right, it makes more sense. So I'm glad Sandra brought that up, because it's definitely a good one.
That's one of those things that I would have just assumed, yeah, it was always like that.
Yeah.
And now you say it, I do remember clicking on those and thinking, this opening an email.
Yep.
So in your purchase suggestion management page now, these patrons listed here will be a link to the patron record rather than a link to send that patron an email. Thanks, Sandra. All right, next I want to talk a little bit about lists, not patron lists, but item lists. So I'm going to go to lists. And public lists. Got two here. I'm going to grab planes. I always click the wrong thing there. I don't want to see it. I want to edit it. Oh, which I can't because it's Donna's. All right, real quick. This is good. We wanted to see this anyway. Okay, so I'm going to make myself a list. So first off, we have a nice new feature here. So when we make a list, we define whether it's going to be public or private. If we make a private list and then we set who can make changes to the contents of this list, we set that to anyone seeing this list, folks had questions about, what does that mean? If my list is private, only I can see it. So why do we have allow changes by anyone who can see this list? We've got a nice new little message that pops up here that says, yeah, actually, this isn't going to do anything. This list is private, so only I will ever see it, so only I can make changes to it. I change that to public. Sure. Our next list feature, if you look over on the left side of the page, previously you could only put items on a list using barcodes. You would put the barcodes in there and hit add, and that would add it to the list. We can now also add items to the list using biblionumbers, which seems like a slightly trivial change until you realize that we all at this point have lots of, good, Heather loves it. We have lots of electronic resources in our catalog, like maybe all of your Overdrive or Cloud Library books are in your catalog, but either without item records or without barcodes in those item records, which had meant you couldn't put them in a list. Or you had to give them a dummy barcode in order to get them in there. So now, since we can add items to the list by biblionumber, we can add anything, whether it has a barcode or not, to our list. For our next nice new list feature, I'm going to jump back over to the OPAC because this is, you get ready for big reveal. Our lists now are able to talk to the Koha cover image server and get cover images. We didn't have cover pictures on items before. Does that mean you can merge the records in the list? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Yeah, you could merge the items. The lists module wouldn't really come into it. If we go, yeah.
Back in the day, merging, you had to put it to a list to merge them, but now you don't need to do that process. So maybe that's what she's thinking of.
It could be. Yeah, you certainly could merge the items that are in the list, but it's sort of two separate features. So there's our list cover images. So we've got a few other nice little quality of life things, and the next one is over in notices, everybody's favorite. Oh, Koha cover images. Koha is a service that provides free cover images. It actually, Bywater runs a Koha server that compiles free cover images from Google, Open Library, and, but my brain just lost it, Amazon. So previously, just a few Kohas ago, you had to pick whether you wanted to look for your cover images from Google or Amazon or Open Library. Koha allows you to look at all three and get better coverage of cover images. It's a free option. Folks who have like Syndetics or Novelist don't need to worry about Koha, but if you're not paying for something to get cover images, Koha will get you better coverage overall than just one of those services. If that's not a thing you're using and you're interested in it, you can set that up in the system preferences, and you can certainly ask us to give you a hand with it. Oh, and it says some catalogers like to build lists of records to maintain at another time. that totally makes sense. My background is in public service librarianship, so I look at something like lists, and all I see is a nice way to show patrons books. I forget that that might be helpful for other things too. COCE is spelled C-O-C-E. And it is, yep, you're welcome. Okay, let's go to notices and slips. I'm going to grab, the duo notice. It doesn't really matter which one. We have in our notices a nice new little feature. If we click on the down arrow off the save button, we have save and continue editing. So a small thing, but a meaningful thing. It just saves and keeps you here rather than if you save it, it bounces you back to the notices page and then you have to go back in. Makes it easier to save your progress and keep working. Next, I'm going to bounce over to course reserves. So we've got a couple new features in course reserves that are saving us from ourselves. First, if I go into my course, my one and only course, this is all we teach at our library, it's designing a garden. When I try to remove a book from the course, it just gives me a nice little, "Are you sure you want to do this?" message. Let's say cancel. And similarly, if I try to delete the course, it gives me a little, "Are you sure you want to do this?" message, and also gives me a count of how many items are attached to this course. So just a couple nice little boxes to stop me from accidentally deleting things I shouldn't be deleting. Or at least make sure I'm aware of what I'm doing. Can we enable COCE cover images by enabling COCE sysprefs? Yeah, so there is a blog post that walks through this all. Kelly, if you wouldn't mind finding that and just toss it in the chat.
I'm talking to you and I'm muted, so yeah, I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
All right, while she does that, I'm going to jump over to administration for a nice new feature by item type. So I'm going into item types, and here we have a new ability to define default replacement cost and processing fee by item type. So if I know that whenever an audiobook is lost and needs to be replaced, let me jump back to Catherine's question about notices. At our library, if a patron has an email listed on their account, we don't receive an overdue notice for them. Is there anything we can do to correct that? I'm going to say, yes, that can be corrected, but I'm not sure what's causing it. That sounds like probably open a ticket for that and we can tease it out.
So she's maybe asking, she wants to receive all the email notifications?
Yeah. We could,
that?
Yeah, do you mean you want to get a copy of the email that is sent to them? Okay. There are a few ways to address that. And yeah, we could do a report. We can make you get a copy of the email that goes to them. Oh, so are you looking at the email you get that lists all the print notices? Yeah, anyway, there are a few options for you there, and we'll get a ticket opened and figure that out. All right, jumping back over to item types. So default replacement cost. This will make it so that for my audiobooks, whenever one is lost, the patron is charged $50 for the replacement of the item and then $8 in processing fee. The default replacement cost, if I have an item-specific replacement cost in that item record, Koha will use that instead. So I buy a fancy audiobook that costs $100, and I put that in the record, it'll charge the $100. And on the other side, if I buy a cheap one, if I buy a $10 audiobook, I can set it to $10 instead. Yep. As Kelly says, there's a system preference, so you can just copy yourself on all those emails. So, and then the processing fee is going to apply to any audiobook. It's a separate charge. So even if for some reason we refund them the lost charge, the replacement cost, they still got that $8 processing fee. I know I've worked with libraries that they always keep that replacement fee on there, sort of as an extra deterrent, even if they do refund the replacement cost for some reason. And I'm going to jump over to my record just to show you how these show up in a patron. Let's go to my files. I fiddled around with my records so much that somehow the library owes me money, which is a good place to be. But if I look back at my account history, you can see that for lost item Familiar Birds of North America, which is an audiobook, I was charged default processing fee of $5. And there's a little note on there that just says default processing fee for this item type. So again, that's something that you're going to define for each item type in administration. Just click Edit and open this up. Default replacement cost and processing fee. And that note that gave some special wording for that processing fee, that's a system preference called processing fee note. So you can put, if you have particular wording you want in there, you can enter that there. There's also a system preference called use default replacement cost that just turns on that default replacement cost feature at all. Next, I'm going to jump back into admin to the circ and fine rules for a favorite of this upgrade. In our great big, very, very wide circ and fine rules table, previously you always had to scroll all the way over to the right end to get these action buttons. We've added new action buttons over on the left side, just to make them easier to get to. Save you some scrolling and some headache. Don't have to follow that line all the way across to the other end anymore. And that brings me to the end of the stuff I wanted to highlight. We have a little more time here if anybody else has specific questions. I saw a couple hands pop up in the course of that. If you want to put those questions in either the chat or the Q&A box, that would be great. Elasticsearch is not in this upgrade. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's independent of an actual Koha upgrade.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And last estimate I heard on that was somewhere in the like 6 to 12 months range.
I'm just going to ask Nick real quick.
And Elasticsearch, for folks who haven't heard that before, is a new search indexing lost the noun, service program. Yeah, capability, that's a good word. That'll just change a little bit how Koha processes searches and give a little more flexibility in there for folks who really want to get in and tinker with the specifics of how searching works.
Oh.
Heather, if I had any ability to make Elasticsearch work better, I would absolutely do that for homemade brownies. Unfortunately, I know a lot more about baking brownies than I know about coding anything. But we'll tell Nick. We'll tell Nick that if he can do it faster, you'll give him brownies.
Nick is saying that there are definitely strides that have been made towards the 1805 version, but we're not sure if we're at that point to implement. And he's saying 1811 for sure, but I wouldn't hold him on that.
Is there a system setting that will alert us when a patron places a hold from their account? Not that I could think of. I'm trying to think of a way to...
There is an email. You can get an email on all holds placed.
Oh, well, there you go. I just have never played with that one. Is that a system preference?
That is a system preference to get an email for holds.
Let's find it. Do you remember what it's called?
Like email holds or holds email. Email librarian when hold is placed is what it's called.
God, I love those system preference names. Is default. Are we getting close to getting an advanced editor for authorities? I do believe that that is an existing bug, but I don't know a timetable on it. Email librarian when hold place. Okay. So if you enable this, and I'm not going to scroll back and see who asked that question. Catherine, if you enable the system preference, it'll send an email to the Koha administrator email address whenever a hold request is placed. Depending on the size of your library, that might be a little overwhelming.
Okay. There.
I've copied too many words in here, but I know that that's defined also in here. Oh, there we go. So that's just another system preference that defines that email address. And I'm guessing Grace is one of your coworkers, so she would get those emails. Yeah, and then if she's not the person who really should know about that, you could probably set up an email filter for her, depending on your email program that would forward that on to whoever should be getting it. And yeah, go ahead.
The bug for the advanced editor, my screen was completely frozen, is 18904. I can't scroll down on it because it's just sitting here on the spinning wheel of death on my computer.
Okay, so we'll see if we can get that page to load.
I mean, seriously, it's just sitting. Oh, come on.
I'm going to jump to Sandra's question. Is default replacement cost overwritten by the RRP in orders? Yeah. Anytime you have an item that has its own replacement cost in, I've forgotten the field, but the replacement cost field in the item record, that's going to override that default. The default only applies if it's blank on the item. And Jane asks, off-topic question, is there a way to find diacritical marks that display improperly? The question mark in the box. Yes, I actually just had a ticket for that we figured out a report to find those things, and it was kind of a mess. It was not the easiest report I've ever seen. I would need to go back and look at a lot of notes to figure it out again. But it is doable. It is findable through reports. I would say open a ticket for that, and we can all scratch our heads and try to remember what we did. But it was some real goofy thing that ended up like querying the Unicode, and it was a thing. head, I don't even know if it's a thing that like could go in the report library meaningfully. I'll poke Barton about it. Barton understood it. I just kind of followed him. And Heather says, thanks for the bug number. And it's so advanced editor for authority records is pushed to master for 1805. Good, that's great. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Pause for typing. Oh, and Kelly says her computer crashed. Oh no. That explains the spinning ball of death. Okay, well, it sounds like nobody else has any other questions at this time. So thank you all so much for coming. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have one more webinar to go. That's going to be tomorrow. Oh, good. Heather's excited for her upgrade. This is I'm happy about this upgrade. It's not one of those that's going to change something that's going to leave you confused for weeks. It's just a whole bunch of nice features that make things easier or quicker. The last upgrade or the last webinar we have is tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. We're going to talk about administration and reports. And if you've missed any previous upgrades, do remember that those are all recorded and available on that page that I linked at the beginning.